Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I want to just associate myself with the comments of my good friend from Kentucky, who I think was just up here and eloquently was giving a case as to why this deal with Iran is such a bad deal. Mr. Speaker, I strongly believe that the national security consequences of the nuclear agreement with Iran will haunt America for generations if Congress does not step in to stop it. This shouldn't be about party. It should not be about loyalty to the president. Because if one thinks about this current president, whether you like him or don't like him, whether you agree with him or don't agree with him, this administration ends in 15 months. But the national security consequences of this deal will go on and haunt America for generations to come. So this deal, this agreement, needs to be evaluated on the substance and how it will impact America and will it make America safer. Mr. Speaker, an overwhelming bipartisan majority of Americans and a bipartisan majority of this Congress are against this agreement. It makes America less safe. If it survives, it's only because the president was able to ram it through on a wholly partisan basis. That's not something to celebrate, Mr. Speaker. The fact is that there are zero bipartisan support for this pact in the United States Congress. Further demonstrates just how dangerous this is for our nation. Mr. Speaker, my very first speech on the floor of this House in 2011, I stated my belief that Iran was the greatest national security threat that we had. Today, I'm even more committed that Iran is the greatest threat that we have to our own national security. By proving that aggression and defiance will be rewarded, this agreement makes the world less safe and, tragically, war more likely. What are we saying to our neighbors? If Iran gets a nuclear weapon, surely its neighbors will go on a nuclear arms race as well. We'll make this dangerous part of the world even less safe than it already is, far more volatile. These concerns have been bipartisan. According to Democratic Senator Bob Menendez, this agreement doesn't end Iran's nuclear program, it preserves it. According to Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer, and I quote, "If Iran's true intent is to get a nuclear weapon, under this agreement, it must simply exercise patience," end quote. Simply put, this agreement won't block Iran's path to a nuclear weapon. Instead, it leaves Iran's nuclear infrastructure intact and amounts to a containment strategy. Settling for only containing a nuclear Iran is a grave mistake that leaves the long-term safety of the United States and our allies vulnerable to nuclear blackmail by Iran. We are all familiar with the basic reasons for why this reckless agreement should be opposed. The agreement relies on a sure-to-fail inspections regime that falls well short of anytime, anywhere inspections that are so critically needed. It fails to deliver on the commitment to dismantle Iran's nuclear infrastructure. Iran actually receives a signing bonus that trades permanent sanctions relief for temporary limitations on its nuclear program. This will provide Iran, the world's greatest state sponsor of terror, and that's not up for debate. That's not disputed. We'll give them $150 billion, which they will no doubt use to fund terror through their proxies in Hezbollah and Hamas, through Assad in Syria, and in South and Central America. Sunset provisions, which simply give Iran a patient path to a nuclear weapon. This agreement lists conventional arms embargo in 5 years and ballistic missile embargo in 8 years. Why were these even on the table, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, I ask you, what do you use an intercontinental ballistic missile for? It's not to drop leaflets. It's not for humanitarian needs. It's to deliver a nuclear warhead to Washington, to New York, to Chicago. I am perplexed because, Mr. Speaker, like many here in this body, I have 3 children, and they have children. We have constituents that are out there. I have a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old, and an 8-year-old. And by the time my 8-year-old goes to college, she will not know a world without Iran having a nuclear weapon. The chance of death to America in the streets. At some point in time, we have to take their word that that's exactly what they want to do. So when we look at this agreement, this legitimizes Iran's nuclear program and provides Iran's illicit nuclear pursuit with international stamps of approval. This is what Iran has been desperately seeking, and yet we have just handed it to them on a platter. Let's remember, when the negotiations began, Iran was an isolated nation. Their economy was in ruins, they were under heavy sanctions, and were outside the international community. But this process has ended with the administration isolating and hammering Israel, and the administration coercing Congress to accept a deal by asserting that the United States would otherwise be blamed for it falling apart. On August 5th, the President gave a speech to promote the Iran agreement and delivered the following line, which had its intended effect of isolating Israel and minimizing her concerns. Because of this is such a strong deal, he said, the nation in the world has commented publicly, with the exception of the Israeli government, that they have expressed their support. I understand my time has expired, Mr. Speaker, but I do want to just note again, a nuclear-armed Iran is the greatest threat we have to our own national security. Going forward and giving the international stamp of approval to them will make the world a less safe place and jeopardize the United States of America, our citizens, and our allies abroad. I yield back.